The stars looked different through the viewing screen of the Liberty as Captain Jake Morrison watched the massive alien ship grow larger. His hands were steady on the controls, but his heart beat fast. After 300 years of wondering if humans were alone in the universe, they were about to meet their neighbors. Ambassador Lisa Carter stood beside him, checking her translation device for the 10th time in 5 minutes. She had spent her whole life studying the possibility of alien contact, but nothing could have prepared her for this moment. The alien ship was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. It seemed to bend light around itself, creating colors that had no names. "Signal coming in, Captain," said Lieutenant Dan Foster from the communication station. His voice cracked slightly. "They're requesting permission to bring us aboard their vessel." Jake nodded slowly. "Tell them we accept." The process of boarding the alien ship felt like stepping into a dream. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing with soft light that responded to their presence. The gravity was lighter than Earth normal, making each step feel like floating. The air tasted of something sweet and electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. Their guides were the Vorthani, beings of pale blue skin and large dark eyes who moved with liquid grace. They spoke without opening their mouths, their words appearing directly in the humans' minds through some kind of telepathy. Lisa found it disturbing at first, the sensation of thoughts that were not her own sliding into her consciousness. "Welcome, young ones," the lead Vorthani said inside their heads. "I am Elder Thus. We have waited long to meet the newest children of the galaxy." The council chamber was vast beyond human understanding. 12 different species sat in a circle around a central platform where holographic displays showed star maps and data streams. Lisa recognized some of the species from their long-range observations. The crystalline zephyrins looked like living diamonds, their bodies catching and reflecting light in patterns that seemed to carry meaning. The deltans floated in spheres of water, their fish-like forms graceful and alien. Elder Thys gestured for the humans to step forward. "Members of the Galactic Council, I present the representatives of the species that calls itself humanity." Lisa stepped onto the platform, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. "Honored members of the Council, I am Ambassador Lisa Carter of Earth. We come in peace, seeking friendship and understanding between our peoples." A ripple of something like amusement passed through the assembled aliens. One of the zephyrins, its crystalline form pulsing with soft yellow light, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "Peace," she says. "How curious." Elder Thys moved closer to Lisa, his large eyes studying her face. "Forgive us, young human. We have reviewed your species' history, and we find your concept of peace unusual." Lisa felt a cold touch in her mind as the Vorthani accessed her memories. She tried to push back, but the alien's mental presence was too strong. Images flashed through her consciousness, memories of human wars, of violence and suffering that stretched back through the centuries. She saw Earth's history through alien eyes, and it looked like a nightmare of endless conflict. The elder jerked back suddenly, his pale face even whiter than before. "By the void," he whispered, and for the first time his words came through his mouth instead of directly into their minds. "What manner of beings are you?" The other council members leaned forward, sensing the distress in their colleague. One of the deltans floating in his water sphere spoke in a burbling voice. "What did you see, Thys?" "Warfare," the elder said, his voice shaking. "Endless, brutal warfare. They have weapons that can destroy entire cities in moments. They have fought wars that consumed entire continents, and the cruelty—" He stopped, unable to continue. Lisa felt her face burn with shame. "We have had our conflicts, yes, but we have also grown. We have learned from our mistakes. We seek to join the galactic community as beings of peace." A new voice spoke from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. "Peace built on the bones of billions," said a creature that looked like living smoke. "We have studied your records, humans. Your entire history is written in blood." Captain Morrison stepped forward, his military bearing evident despite his attempt to appear diplomatic. "We don't deny our past. Every species must have faced challenges in their development. Surely you can understand that growth requires struggle. The crystalline zephyrin pulsed with orange light, a color that somehow conveyed disgust. Struggle, yes, but not wholesale slaughter, not the systematic destruction of your own kind. We have never encountered a species so consumed by violence. Elder This had recovered somewhat, though he still looked shaken. Perhaps, he said carefully, there is a place for your kind in the galaxy, but it must be a limited place. A supervised place. Lisa felt her heart sink. What do you mean? The Council has protocols for dealing with developing species, explained the Deltan. Typically, new members serve a probationary period. Given your unique history, we believe a period of several centuries would be appropriate. Centuries? Morrison's voice was sharp. What exactly are you proposing? The Elder's mental voice was formal now, official. Provisional membership in the Galactic Council, with restricted rights and responsibilities. You would be assigned sectors for resource extraction and basic labor. Your military vessels would be monitored at all times. Your expansion would be limited to systems we designate as safe for your kind. You're talking about making us second-class citizens in our own galaxy, Lisa said, trying to keep the anger out of her voice. We prefer to think of it as guidance, said the smoke creature. Your species clearly needs time to evolve beyond its violent impulses. The Council has maintained peace for over 3,000 years. We cannot allow that peace to be threatened by a species that views warfare as natural. Morrison's jaw was tight. And if we refuse these terms? The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Finally, Elder Thys spoke. The galaxy is large, young humans. There is room for many kinds of beings, but the Council protects its members from threats, external and internal. Lisa looked around the chamber at the assembled aliens. She could see it in their faces, or what passed for faces among the different species. They were afraid of humanity, not just cautious or concerned, but genuinely afraid. To them, humans were not potential allies, but dangerous predators who needed to be contained. We will need time to consider your offer, she said finally. Of course, Elder Thys replied. Take all the time you need. The Council is patient. As they were escorted back to their ship, Lisa caught Morrison's arm. This isn't what we hoped for. No, he agreed grimly. It's not, but it's what we've got to work with. The journey back to Earth felt longer than the trip out. They carried with it the weight of first contact and the bitter taste of being judged and found wanting. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, but they were also no longer masters of their own destiny. In the observation deck of the Liberty, Jake Morrison stared out at the stars and wondered what they had really gained from this first meeting. They had sought equals among the stars and found only judges. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, but it was also full of beings who saw humanity as a threat to be managed rather than a partner to be welcomed. The future stretched out before them, uncertain and difficult. But one thing was clear. If humanity was to survive in this larger galaxy, they would need to prove themselves worthy in ways they had never imagined. The question was whether they could do so while remaining true to who they were, or whether the price of acceptance would be the loss of their essential humanity. 2 years had passed since humanity's disappointing first meeting with the Galactic Council. Earth's ships now patrolled the outer rim of Council space, carrying cargo and performing the basic tasks assigned to them. It was honest work, but it stung to be treated like children by beings who had never known real conflict. Dr. Sam Mitchell was studying star charts in his laboratory aboard Luna Station when the alarms began to sound. The readings on his instruments made no sense at first. Something massive was moving at the edge of the galaxy, something that bent space around itself in ways that should have been impossible. Captain Morrison, Sam called over the communication system. You need to see this. Jake Morrison arrived at the lab within minutes, still pulling on his uniform jacket. The years of restricted service had aged him, adding lines around his eyes and gray to his hair. What have you got, Sam? Energy readings from the galactic rim. Something big is coming this way, moving faster than anything we've seen before. Sam pointed to the display showing a three-dimensional map of local space. Whatever it is, it's heading straight for the populated systems. Jake studied the readings with growing concern. How big are we talking? Ship-sized objects, maybe dozens of them, but the energy output is off the charts. This is technology that makes the Council's best ships look like rowboats. Before Jake could respond, an emergency signal came through from Council space. The voice was Elder Thice, but the usual calm was gone, replaced by something close to panic. All ships, all stations. We have lost contact with the Kepler 442 system. Repeat, complete communication blackout from Kepler 442. Jake and Sam looked at each other. Kepler 442 was home to 3 billion Altarians, peaceful beings who spent their lives creating art and music. The idea of them simply disappearing was impossible to process. Get me a connection to the Council, Jake ordered. Within an hour, Jake found himself in a virtual meeting with the Council leadership. The aliens who had once seemed so superior now looked shaken and confused. Elder Thiss appeared as a flickering hologram, his pale blue skin even whiter than usual. The entire system is silent, Thiss reported. No distress calls, no evacuation signals. Our scout ships report finding debris fields where the colonies should be. What kind of debris? Asked Captain Morrison. Everything, said Admiral Zorvac. Of the Deltans, his water sphere rippling with agitation. Buildings, ships, even planetary surface material torn away and scattered through space, as if something stripped the worlds bare. A cold feeling settled in Jake's stomach. What about survivors? The silence that followed gave him his answer. We are calling them the Devourers, said Elder Thiss, though we do not yet understand what they are or what they want. I can tell you what they want, said Dr. Mitchell, who had been monitoring the meeting. They want everything. My readings suggest they're harvesting all organic and technological material from each system they hit. The Council members exchanged glances that spoke of growing fear. These were beings who had lived in peace for thousands of years, and the concept of total warfare was foreign to them. Surely we can negotiate, suggested Counselor Vex of the Zephyrins. All sentient beings must have some common ground for understanding. Jake bit back his first response. Instead, he said carefully, have they responded to any communication attempts? No, admitted Admiral Zorvac, but perhaps our approach has been insufficient. We must try harder to understand their perspective. Their perspective seems pretty clear, said Commander Nick Hayes, joining the conversation from his patrol ship near the border. They see something they want and they take it. Everything. The Council members looked uncomfortable at this blunt assessment. They were used to viewing conflicts through the lens of misunderstanding and diplomatic solutions. The idea of an enemy that could not be reasoned with was beyond their experience. Over the following weeks, the pattern became clear. System after system fell silent as the Devourers moved deeper into Council space. Each attack followed the same method: complete destruction of all life, harvesting of all useful materials, and something else that puzzled the investigators. Dr. Kelly Brooks, a xenoarchaeologist who had joined the investigation teams, made the first breakthrough. She was studying the remains of an Altarian colony world when she noticed the strange patterns carved into the planet's surface. They're not random, she reported to Jake over a secure channel. These markings, they follow mathematical principles. It's like some kind of writing or calculation, but looking at them too long makes me feel sick. Sick how? Jake asked. Hard to describe, like something is wrong with reality itself around these marks. The other researchers are having the same problem. The Council species can barely look at them without getting severe headaches. Jake stored that information away. It might be important later. The Devourers continued their advance, and panic began to spread through Council space. Entire worlds were evacuating their populations, fleeing toward the galactic core. The Council's military, designed for peacekeeping rather than warfare, proved completely inadequate against the new threat. Our weapons are useless, Admiral Zorvac admitted during another emergency meeting. Their ships phase in and out of normal space. We cannot target what we cannot properly detect. What about your defensive strategies? Asked Jake. The Deltan looked embarrassed. Our last real military conflict was over 1,000 years ago. Most of our tactical knowledge is theoretical. Jake felt a grim satisfaction at hearing this admission. The Council had looked down on humanity for their history of warfare, but now that history might be exactly what was needed. We could help, he offered. Human military forces have experience with asymmetric warfare and adaptive tactics. Elder Thys hesitated. Your species' approach to conflict is concerning. We fear that involving humans might escalate the situation unnecessarily. The situation is already escalated, Jake pointed out. You've lost 6 systems in as many weeks. How much worse can it get? We appreciate the offer, said Counselor Vex, but we believe peaceful solutions are still possible. Perhaps if we demonstrate our commitment to nonviolence, the Devourers will recognize our peaceful intentions. Jake closed his eyes and counted to 10 before responding. And if they don't? Then we will evacuate further toward the core and maintain our defensive positions until a diplomatic solution can be found. That was when Jake realized the full scope of the problem. The Council wasn't just unprepared for war, they were psychologically incapable of accepting that war might be necessary. Their entire civilization was built on the idea that all conflicts could be resolved through discussion and compromise. The breaking point came when the Devourers reached the Vorthani homeworld. Mindspring was more than just a planet. It was a living organism that housed the collective consciousness of the entire Vorthani species. When it fell, the psychic scream of millions of dying minds echoed across Council space. Elder Thys appeared in Jake's quarters that night, his holographic form flickering with interference from his damaged ship. Half of his face was burned and his large eyes were filled with pain and loss. They consumed everything, he whispered. Not just our bodies, but our minds, our memories, our very souls. I can feel the emptiness where my people used to be. Jake said nothing. There were no words for this kind of loss. We need your help, Thys continued. I know we have not treated your species well. I know we look down on you for your capacity for violence. But now... He paused, struggling with the admission. Now I understand that sometimes violence is the only language that matters. What are you asking me to do? Jake said quietly. Save us, Elder Thys replied. Save us all. Jake looked out at the stars, thinking of Earth and the billions of humans who had been relegated to second-class status in the galaxy. They had wanted to be part of something greater, to prove that humanity could rise above its violent past. Instead, they might need to embrace that past to ensure there was a future worth having. I'll need full access to Council military resources and complete tactical authority, Jake said finally. Granted, and I'll need to do this the human way. That means some of your people are going to be uncomfortable with our methods. Elder Thys nodded slowly. We are already uncomfortable, Captain Morrison. Now we need to survive. Outside Jake's window, the stars continued to shine, but they seemed somehow dimmer now. Somewhere out there, an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced was consuming entire civilizations. The Council had tried to solve the problem with diplomacy and defensive measures, and they had failed completely. Now, it was humanity's turn to show the galaxy what they could do. Jake only hoped that when this was over, there would still be something left worth saving. The emergency council meeting took place aboard the massive station sanctuary, deep in the galactic core where the oldest civilizations had built their first cities among the stars. Representatives from all surviving member species filled the great chamber, but the usual calm order was gone. Fear had replaced dignity, and desperation had replaced careful protocol. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the center of the chamber, no longer the cautious diplomat seeking acceptance. Beside him, General Amy Foster held a datapad containing humanity's complete analysis of the Devourer threat. The weight of 12 civilizations' survival rested on what they said next. The situation is worse than you realize, Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Dr. Mitchell's analysis shows that the Devourers aren't attacking randomly. They're following precise resource acquisition patterns, hitting systems with the highest concentration of useful materials first. Elder Theiss, his once proud bearing broken by the loss of his homeworld, leaned forward in his seat. What does this mean for our remaining worlds? Dr. Sam Mitchell activated the holographic display, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with red markers indicating devourer attacks. They're following a spiral pattern inward. Based on their current trajectory, they'll reach the core systems within 6 months. A ripple of distress passed through the assembled delegates. Counselor Vex's crystalline form flickered with nervous energy. Surely there must be worlds they will bypass. Systems with lower strategic value. No, said General Foster bluntly. They're not bypassing anything. Every world in their path gets consumed completely. But there's something else. She paused, making sure she had everyone's attention. The geometric patterns they leave behind aren't random marks. They're territorial markers. Commander Nick Hayes stepped forward from where he had been observing. We've been studying the wreckage of their attacks. The patterns serve a dual purpose. They mark claimed territory, but they also do something to local space-time. Areas with these markings show unusual quantum fluctuations. Admiral Zorvac of the Deltans bubbled anxiously in his water sphere. What kind of fluctuations? The kind that suggest they're preparing for something bigger than just resource harvesting, Hayes replied. We think they're building something. A network of some kind using the consumed worlds as nodes. The implications hit the council members like a physical blow. Elder Theiss spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. They're not just destroying our civilization, they're using it to build their own. Jake nodded grimly. Which brings us to our tactical assessment. Your current defensive strategy isn't working because you're thinking like prey instead of predators. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Several council members shifted uncomfortably at the blunt military language. What do you mean? Asked Counselor Vex. General Foster activated another display, showing the failed defense of Aquaticus Prime. Your forces create defensive perimeters around threatened worlds, then wait for the enemy to attack. This gives the Devourers every advantage. They choose when and where to engage, they can study your defensive patterns, and they can concentrate their forces against your weakest points. What alternative do you suggest? Admiral Zorvac asked, though his tone suggested he already feared the answer. Jake's expression hardened. We stop defending and start hunting. Mobile strike forces that can hit their supply lines, disrupt their operations, and force them to react to our moves instead of the other way around. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. Elder Theiss raised a hand for silence. You're talking about offensive operations, about deliberately seeking out combat. I'm talking about survival, Jake replied. The Devourers don't respond to diplomacy, they don't honor ceasefires, and they don't negotiate. The only language they understand is force. But surely, said a delegate from the peaceful Meridian species, there must be a way to communicate with them. All sentient beings must have some capacity for reason. Dr. Kelly Brooks, who had been studying the Devourer artifacts, stepped forward. We've tried every form of communication we can think of. Mathematical sequences, universal constants, even music and art. They ignore all of it. But they respond to one thing, resistance. When we fight back, their behavior patterns change. Change how? Asked Elder Theiss. They start making mistakes, Brooks replied. Their attacks become less coordinated, their movements less predictable. It's almost like they're not used to facing organized opposition. General Foster brought up tactical displays showing successful human engagements against Devourer scouts. We've had limited success using hit-and-run tactics against their smaller ships, but to make a real difference, we need authorization to use the full range of human military capabilities. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, Counselor Vex voiced what everyone was thinking. What exactly are you asking permission to do? Jake met the crystalline ore being's gaze steadily. Everything necessary to win. Total warfare with no restrictions except the protection of innocent lives. That's exactly what we feared, said Admiral Zorvac. Your species' capacity for violence unleashed without restraint. Our capacity for violence focused on the right target, Jake corrected. The Devourers have already proven they won't show mercy to your people. Why should we show mercy to them? The debate that followed revealed the fundamental divide between human and council thinking. The council species saw war as an aberration, something to be ended as quickly as possible with minimal damage to all parties. Humans saw war as a tool, brutal but sometimes necessary, to be used with maximum efficiency until the enemy surrendered or was destroyed. Elder Thais finally called for a vote. All in favor of granting humanity full military authority to combat the Devourer threat? The results were closer than Jake had expected. Fear won over philosophy, but barely. The authorization passed by a single vote. There will be conditions, Elder Thys announced. Human forces will be monitored by council observers. Any actions deemed unnecessarily destructive will result in immediate suspension of authorization. Understood, Jake replied, though privately. He wondered how the council would define unnecessarily destructive when facing an enemy that had already consumed dozens of worlds. The meeting broke up with the various delegates returning to their ships to spread the news. Humanity had been given the authority to wage war on behalf of the galaxy, but with it came a responsibility that weighed heavily on Jake's shoulders. General Foster joined him at the observation deck after the others had left. Think we can pull this off? We'd better, Jake replied, watching the stars beyond the station's hull. Because if we fail, there won't be a galaxy left to save. And if we succeed? Jake was quiet for a long moment. If we succeed, they'll fear us even more than they fear the Devourers. The question is whether they'll still want us around when the shooting stops. That night, Jake sent a coded message back to Earth. The message was simple. Authorization. Granted. Begin full mobilization. Rules of engagement. Whatever it takes. Earth's response came back within hours. Understood. Terra Command is activating all reserve fleets. God help us all. As Jake prepared for sleep, he wondered if they were about to save the galaxy or damn it. The line between protector and conqueror was thinner than most people realized, and humanity was about to walk that line with the fate of 12 civilizations hanging in the balance. Outside his window, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the struggles of the small beings who fought and died among them. Soon those same stars would witness humanity's true nature revealed not in the halls of diplomacy, but on the battlefields of space. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had been feared even before the Devourers arrived. Some lessons, Jake reflected grimly, could only be taught through fire and blood. Captain Tony Rodriguez gripped the controls of his battlecruiser Freedom as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Arcturus system. Around him, 12 other human ships materialized from the void, their hulls dark against the stars. This was humanity's first real strike against the Devourers, and everyone knew the galaxy was watching. Contact ahead, reported Lieutenant Ben Clark from the sensor station. 3 Devourer ships, medium class. They're stripping the asteroid mining stations. Tony studied the tactical display. The Devourer vessels moved with mechanical precision, using energy beams to tear apart the mining platforms and suck the debris into their cargo holds. They showed no sign of detecting the approaching human fleet. Remember the plan? Tony said over the comm to his squadron leaders. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we get out before they can respond with reinforcements. Admiral Morrison's voice crackled through the communications array from his command ship orbiting Sanctuary Station. Freedom Squadron, you are cleared for engagement. Show the galaxy what humans can do. The attack began with a coordinated strike that caught the Devourers completely off guard. Human ships used stealth technology and unpredictable flight patterns that the alien tactical computers couldn't process. Where Council forces had relied on formation flying and textbook maneuvers, humans brought chaos to the battlefield. Major Lisa Kane led the assault from her fighter wing, diving through the Devourer formation while firing concentrated bursts at critical systems. Target their phase generators, she called out to her pilots. Dr. Brooks was right, they can't shift dimensions if we damage those conduits. The first Devourer ship exploded in a burst of white light as its power core overloaded. The remaining 2 vessels tried to retreat, but Colonel Pete Walker's destroyer Vengeance was already in position to block their escape route. No prisoners, no mercy. Walker's voice was cold over the radio. These things don't give quarter, so neither do we. The battle lasted only minutes, but it sent shockwaves through both human and alien observers. For the first time since the Devourer attacks began, an entire enemy squadron had been destroyed without losing a single Allied ship. Dr. Kelly Brooks examined the wreckage from aboard her research vessel, scanning the debris for useful intelligence. The geometric patterns are definitely dimensional anchors, she reported to Admiral Morrison. When we damage them, the ships get trapped in normal space, where our weapons can hurt them. The victory at Arcturus was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, human strike forces began hitting Devourer operations throughout the Outer Rim. Captain Sarah Davis earned a reputation for her ramming attacks, using her destroyer Defiant like a battering ram against larger enemy vessels. Her crew would evacuate in escape pods at the last second, leaving the ship to slam into Devourer hulls with devastating effect. The human approach to warfare horrified the Council observers who had been assigned to monitor the operations. They watched in shock as human commanders used tactics that seemed insane by galactic standards. Kamikaze attacks, booby-trapped cargo containers, and psychological warfare that targeted the Devourer's apparent weakness for predictable patterns. "This is madness," reported Council Observer Keth during one engagement. "The humans are sacrificing entire ships to destroy single enemy vessels. Their casualty rates are astronomical." General Foster, coordinating the overall campaign from Terra Command, reviewed the reports with grim satisfaction. "Our casualty rates are high, but our success rate is higher. We're trading human lives for Devourer ships at a ratio that favors us." The Devourers began to adapt to human tactics, but their responses revealed something important. Commander Hayes, analyzing battle recordings, noticed that enemy formations started avoiding systems where human forces were known to operate. "They're afraid," he reported during a strategy meeting. "For the first time since they arrived, the Devourers are showing fear responses. They're changing course to avoid us even when it means missing valuable targets." Dr. Mitchell had been tracking Devourer movements across the galaxy, and his findings supported Hayes' assessment. Their attack patterns have become erratic. They're no longer following optimal resource acquisition routes. Several target systems have been bypassed entirely because human forces were detected in the area. The breakthrough came when Hayes led a deep reconnaissance mission into Devourer-controlled space. His team discovered the source of the enemy's operations, a massive construct built from the merged remains of dozens of consumed worlds. The structure was larger than most moons, its surface covered with the geometric patterns that served as dimensional anchors. "It's not just a base," Hayes reported from his stealth ship. "It's like a fortress or maybe a refuge. And there's something else, something that doesn't make sense." Admiral Morrison leaned forward in his command chair. "What kind of something?" "Energy readings from the construct's core. They match the quantum signatures we've detected from consumed populations. I think the Devourers are storing something inside that thing. Maybe the consciousness of everyone they've killed." The implications were staggering. If the Devourers were preserving their victims rather than simply destroying them, it changed everything about their motivations and goals. General Foster called an emergency meeting with the Council leadership. "We've located their primary base of operations. It's heavily defended, but we believe a coordinated assault could succeed." Elder Thys, still bearing the scars from the fall of his homeworld, studied the tactical projections. "The losses would be enormous. You're talking about a direct assault on the heart of their power." "Sometimes that's what victory requires," Foster replied. "Half measures won't work against an enemy like this." "But the cost in human lives." Admiral Zorvak's water sphere rippled with distress. "Will be acceptable if it ends this war," interrupted Captain Rodriguez, who had joined the meeting via hologram from his ship. "My crews know what they signed up for. We didn't come out here to play it safe." The debate continued for hours, but the decision was inevitable. The Devourers had shown no sign of stopping their advance, and defensive strategies had failed completely. Only a decisive strike against their main base offered hope of victory. "There's something else you should know," Dr. Brooks added during the final planning session. "The construct isn't just a military target. Based on the energy readings, I believe it contains technology and knowledge from every civilization they've consumed. If we can capture it instead of destroying it, we might be able to restore some of what was lost." The plan that emerged was audacious even by human standards. A combined fleet of human and council ships would assault the construct directly, using the humans' aggressive tactics to punch through the Devourer defenses, while council vessels provided support and evacuation capabilities. Admiral Morrison named the operation Prometheus, after the mythological figure who stole fire from the gods. It seemed appropriate for a mission that would either save the galaxy or doom it to eternal darkness. As the combined fleet assembled for the assault, Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship Determination and watched the mix of human and alien vessels preparing for battle. Ships that had once represented the height of peaceful cooperation were now being outfitted with the most destructive weapons humanity could provide. "Think we can pull this off?" asked General Foster, joining him at the observation window. "We'd better," Morrison replied, "because if we fail here, there won't be anywhere left to retreat to." The final battle for the galaxy's survival was about to begin, and humanity would lead the charge into the heart of darkness. Whatever emerged from the coming fight would determine not just whether civilization survived, but what form that survival would take. In the distance, the Devourer construct waited like a cancer at the galaxy's edge, its geometric patterns pulsing with malevolent energy. Soon, it would face the full fury of species that had learned to turn their capacity for violence toward a single, focused purpose: the total destruction of their enemies. The combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Devourer construct with a flash of light that could be seen from 3 star systems away. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship Determination, watching as nearly 1,000 ships formed into attack formation. Human vessels led the assault groups while council ships provided support from the rear. "All stations report ready," announced Commander Hayes from the tactical station. "The construct is responding to our presence." The enemy base was even larger than their intelligence had suggested. What they had thought was a moon-sized structure turned out to be something closer to a small planet, its surface crawling with defensive weapons and geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. As the fleet approached, energy beams began lancing out from the construct, targeting the lead ships with deadly precision. "Begin the attack," Morrison ordered. "All human squadrons, execute Plan Prometheus." Captain Rodriguez led the first wave, in his battlecruiser Freedom, diving straight toward the construct's heavily defended North Pole. Around him, human ships broke formation and scattered in patterns that seemed random, but followed a carefully planned chaos designed to confuse enemy targeting systems. The Devourers responded exactly as human tacticians had predicted. Their weapons were designed to target organized formations, not the wild, unpredictable movements of human ships. Energy beams that should have destroyed entire squadrons instead missed their targets as human pilots flew like madmen through the defensive fire. "Phase 1 successful," reported Major Kane from her fighter wing. "Defensive grid is confused. Beginning Phase 2. The real attack began when human ships started ramming the construct's defensive towers. Captain Davis led the charge in her destroyer Defiant, aiming her ship at a massive energy cannon while her crew evacuated in escape pods. The explosion when Defiant struck home took out 3 defensive positions and opened a gap in the construct's armor. "This is insane," muttered Council Observer Keth, watching from the safety of a Council support ship. "They're destroying their own vessels faster than the enemy can." General Foster, coordinating the battle from her command ship, understood what the Observer couldn't. "Each ship we lose takes out 10 times its value in enemy defenses. That's not insane. That's mathematics." The breakthrough came when Colonel Walker's squadron found a weak point in the construct's hull. The geometric patterns that covered the surface were more than just armor. They were part of a network that channeled energy throughout the structure. When human weapons damaged enough of them in one area, an entire section of the construct lost power. "There," shouted Dr. Brooks from her position at the science station. "The patterns are like a circuit board. If we can overload the network, we can shut down their defenses." Morrison made the call that would define the battle. "All ships, target the geometric patterns. Ignore the defensive weapons and focus everything on those markings." What followed was the most desperate hour of fighting in galactic history. Human ships threw themselves at the construct's surface, some pilots making multiple ramming runs, before their vessels finally broke apart. The casualty rate was horrific, but the strategy worked. Section by section, the construct's defenses went dark. Commander Hayes led the first boarding party into the construct's interior, expecting to find corridors and chambers like a normal space station. Instead, they discovered something far stranger. The inside of the construct was hollow, filled with a vast space that contained what looked like billions of glowing spheres floating in organized patterns. "Admiral," Hayes called over the radio, his voice filled with wonder and horror, "you need to see this." The spheres, it turned out, contained the preserved consciousness of every being the Devourers had consumed. Millions of Altarians, Vorthani, and members of dozens of other species floated in suspended animation, their minds intact but their bodies long gone. At the center of this vast repository, Hayes found the Devourer Command Center. What he discovered there changed everything they thought they knew about their enemy. The Devourers weren't conquerors or even predators in the traditional sense. They were refugees, the last survivors of their own galaxy, fleeing from something they called the Silence. The preserved minds weren't trophies or food sources, they were rescue attempts. The Devourers had been trying to save as many consciousness as possible from what they saw as an inevitable fate. "They're afraid," Hayes reported as he studied the alien displays. "Terrified of something that consumed their entire galaxy. They've been harvesting other civilizations not to destroy them, but to preserve them against something worse." The revelation created a moment of paralysis among the human forces. They had come to destroy their enemy, only to discover that their enemy might have been trying to save them in the only way they knew how. Ambassador Carter, who had joined the mission specifically for this possibility, made contact with the Devourer collective consciousness through their central network. The conversation that followed was unlike anything in diplomatic history. The Devourers revealed that they were the last remnants of a galaxy consumed by entities of pure entropy called the Silence. These beings didn't just destroy matter and energy, they unmade the very concept of existence itself. The Devourers had barely escaped their home galaxy and had been preparing for the Silence's eventual arrival in this one. "Your methods are wrong," Carter told the collective, speaking through the construct's communication system while the battle raged outside. "You're destroying the very civilizations you're trying to save." "We preserve what matters," the Devourers responded in voices that echoed with the pain of countless losses. "Physical forms decay, but consciousness endures. We offer immortality." "You offer prison," Carter replied. "These beings didn't choose your form of salvation." The negotiation that followed was conducted while human and Devourer forces continued to tear each other apart in space around the construct. It was Dr. Brooks who suggested the solution that would save both civilizations. "Work with us instead of against us," she proposed. "Help us prepare for this Silence threat using methods that don't require consuming entire worlds. We'll help you find new bodies for the preserved minds and new worlds where they can live freely." The agreement reached in the construct's core was unlike any treaty in galactic history. The Devourers would cease their attacks on inhabited worlds and work with the Council to prepare defenses against the Silence. In exchange, the galaxy's civilizations would help relocate the billions of preserved consciousness to new homes and bodies. But the price of victory was higher than anyone had anticipated. Humanity had revealed capabilities that terrified even their allies. The galaxy was safe, but it was a safety bought with the demonstration that humans would do absolutely anything to win. 5 years later, Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of the new Galactic Defense Station, watching mixed fleets of human, Council, and former Devourer ships patrol in formations, that would have been impossible before the war. The galaxy was united as never before, but it was a unity built on shared fear of two things: the coming threat of the Silence and humanity's willingness to embrace any level of violence necessary to protect what they valued. Dr. Mitchell joined, him at the window, carrying reports that long-range sensors had detected energy signatures at the galaxy's far edge that matched devourer descriptions of the Silence. "How long do we have?" Morrison asked. "Maybe 50 years, maybe less," Mitchell replied. "The Silence moves slowly, but they never stop." Morrison nodded, watching human ships drill with their alien allies in maneuvers that combined the best of both tactical philosophies. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity, but that fear might be the only thing standing between civilization and complete annihilation. "Think we're ready for what's coming?" Mitchell asked. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, thinking of all the lives that had been lost, all the choices that had been made, and all the prices that had been paid. "We'd better be," he said finally, "because this time, there's nowhere left to run." Outside the station, the stars continued their ancient dance, but now they were guarded by beings who understood that sometimes the greatest act of love was being willing to be hated, and the greatest act of peace was preparing for the most terrible war imaginable.